The town of Lakeview was one of those places where life flowed slowly, as if not noticing that beyond its borders the passions of the big world were boiling. Here, in a small house on the outskirts, lived the Brooks family. Their house was neither too big nor too small, the most ordinary two-story with a neat garden in front of the entrance. Lisa and Tom Brooks seemed like a typical American couple. Tom worked as a manager in a local insurance company, and Lisa kept the books of a small store. Their children, 16-year-old Zach and 14-year-old Sophie, were teenagers with the experiences and dreams inherent in their age. Every morning in the family began the same way. Tom got up first to make himself coffee and read the news a little before work. Lisa, being more practical, at this time made shopping lists and checked that everything was ready for the children. Zach and Sophie left their rooms a few minutes before they had to be taken to school. They usually exchanged a few phrases, mostly on banal topics like, "Don't forget your textbook," or "Give me the keys to the car." Zach was a typical high school student. He was into basketball, hoped to get a sports scholarship, and dreamed of going to college. His room was covered with posters of his favorite teams, and there was a pile of balls and sneakers in the corner. Sophie was the complete opposite. She was interested in books, music, and everything related to art. The girl enjoyed drawing, playing the piano, and did not understand why her brother spent so much time on sports. Lisa and Tom tried to support their children in their hobbies, but sometimes it was difficult. The family budget always required strict planning, and although the parents did everything possible so that the children did not feel anything, sometimes they still had to refuse. For example, when Sophie wanted a new piano, Lisa explained that there was no money for it yet, but perhaps they could consider buying it in a year. Zach, in turn, dreamed of going to a basketball tournament, but instead was content with local games. However, there was something in their life that united the whole family. Every weekend, the Brookses went on a picnic to a nearby park. Tom always joked that it was their family tradition to sit in the same place, spreading a blanket under a large oak tree, and eat sandwiches. Lisa sometimes made homemade lemonade or baked pies, and the children happily ran around the park or simply enjoyed the fresh air. It seemed that these moments gave the family the connection that was sometimes lost in the hustle and bustle of everyday life. But not everything in the Brookses' life was so simple. Hidden worries and anxieties hung in the air. Lisa often stayed late into the evenings, pretending to sort out bills, but in reality she kept her books with far more meticulousness than was required for their current income. Tom, in turn, never told the children where he went every Saturday morning, claiming that it was work-related. The children did not ask unnecessary questions. They were accustomed to the idea that their parents were simply doing everything to provide for their future. Tom himself often wondered whether they were doing the right thing by hiding the truth from their children. Even before they were born, he and Lisa had decided to live like ordinary people. They thought that this way their children would learn to value work, develop their abilities, and not consider money the main measure of success. Their acquaintances were often surprised to see how the Brookses economized or did without unnecessary things. "Why do you live so modestly?" one neighbor Cindy asked, dropping in on a visit. Lisa just smiled. "That's enough for us." And it was true. The family really did value the moments that made them happy. But the children increasingly felt that their parents weren't telling them everything. Sophie once even found a box of strange documents in her parents' closet. There were papers with numbers that meant nothing to her, but the girl felt that it was important. Zach also noticed oddities sometimes. For example, how his parents calmly paid medical bills that were clearly higher than their income. Both teenagers decided not to raise this topic for now, but the questions were piling up. Everything changed one Saturday evening when Tom, returning from work, suddenly invited the children to ask him any questions that worried them. "Why are you so thoughtful?" Sophie, who was always distinguished by her straightforwardness, blurted out first. Tom hesitated, but, looking at his wife, replied, "I'm just thinking about the future, and how to make sure you are ready for it." These words seemed strange to the children, but no further explanation followed. Lisa switched the conversation to something more familiar, and the evening continued as usual. But each of the Brookses already had their own thoughts brewing in their heads. It was a surprisingly warm autumn day, and Lisa suggested that they spend time with the whole family in the park. It was a Brookses tradition to gather for a picnic to enjoy nature and forget about everyday worries, at least for a while. The park was located on the outskirts of the city. Green meadows, tall trees with colorful leaves, rustling wind and ringing laughter of children playing nearby created a feeling of calm. Lisa carefully packed a picnic basket, turkey sandwiches, apples, homemade lemonade, and a couple of cookies that she managed to bake the day before. Tom hurried the children, reminding them that it was time to go, but the teenagers, as always, were reluctant to get ready. Zach muttered silently to himself, putting headphones and a basketball in his backpack, hoping to play if possible. Sophie was focused on taking the book she had started reading a couple of days ago. Family walks were always an excuse for her to retreat to the shade of the trees and indulge in her favorite pastime. However, this time the atmosphere in the family was somewhat different. After the recent conversation at dinner, Sophie and Zach could not shake the feeling that their parents were hiding something. This feeling haunted them all day. Tom and Lisa, as usual, tried to remain relaxed, but it was noticeable that their behavior was slightly tense. The glances that they exchanged from time to time spoke of some internal dialogue that was inaccessible to children. The picnic began as usual. In the familiar clearing under the old oak tree, the parents spread out a blanket, laid out treats, and tried to involve the children in conversation. Tom talked about his recent work, and Lisa mentioned plans for the next week, but neither discussion held the teenagers' attention. Zach threw the ball in the air, increasingly looking away from his father so as not to meet his eyes, and Sophie involuntarily lingered on her mother, trying to understand what was hidden behind her calm smile. This feeling that there was something more hidden behind the words of their parents did not leave them. After the picnic on the way home, the children caught each other's eyes. Without saying anything, they already understood that they were thinking about the same thing. The determination to find out the truth grew, and they both knew that they would not rest until they found answers to their questions. The next morning began in the usual bustle. Lisa was making breakfast, Tom was getting ready for work, and the children were rushing around the house, picking up things for school. But behind this everyday rhythm, there was tension. Sophie remembered a box of documents that she had once seen in her parents' closet. At the time, it seemed insignificant to her, but now the memory took on new meaning. She felt that there could be something important there. Zach, in turn, also noticed a few oddities. He remembered how his father had once hidden keys in the kitchen drawer that clearly did not belong to the car or the house. These little things began to form a picture that did not correspond in any way to their ordinary life. As the day went on, he noticed more and more how carefully his parents concealed some part of their lives. That evening, when Tom and Lisa went to bed, the children made a silent decision to act. Sophie knocked on her brother's door, motioning for him to follow her. Together, they walked toward their parents' room, trying not to make a sound. The silence in the house seemed deafening, and every rustle made them freeze in their tracks. The bedroom was dark. Only the dim light of the nightlight illuminated the room. Sophie knew where the box was, so she immediately went to the closet and carefully opened the bottom drawer. There was the same box she had seen earlier. With trembling hands, she took it out and placed it on the floor. Zach turned on the flashlight on his phone to get a better look at the contents. The first thing that caught their eye was the documents with bank statements. On each page were huge sums of money that could not be connected in any way with their family's lifestyle. The numbers were amazing, and the teenagers immediately had questions. How could such money exist if their parents had always lived so modestly? At the bottom of the box were photographs. One of them showed their parents, but they looked completely different. Lisa was wearing a luxurious evening dress, and Tom was wearing a formal suit. They were standing in front of some huge building with columns, similar to a hotel or a museum. Their faces were shining with happiness, and this image did not fit with the image of modest people that the children knew. Zach looked at the picture for a long time, trying to find an explanation for what he saw. These were their parents, but what kind of life was this that they knew nothing about? Sophie carefully leafed through the documents, but her thoughts were already far away. She tried to imagine what kind of secret this was, and why they knew nothing about it. Feeling movement on the bed, the children froze in fear. Tom tossing and turning in his sleep reminded them that their time was running out. They quickly put everything back in the box, returned it to its place, and left the bedroom as quietly as they had come in. When Zach and Sophie returned to their room, the same questions were spinning in each of their heads. What did these photos mean? Why did their parents hide their past? And how did this relate to their current lives? They knew the answers would not be easy, but their determination to find out the truth only grew stronger. The next morning, the house was once again filled with the usual bustle. Lisa was busy with breakfast, Tom was reading the newspaper, and the children were silently eating cereal, thinking about their plans for the near future. Their parents seemed to suspect nothing, but the teenagers knew that the truth was closer than ever. After the night's adventure, Sophie and Zach tried to keep a low profile. Their daily life remained the same. School, homework, short evening conversations over dinner. But inside, they sensed that their family was living with a double bottom. The mystery they had begun to unravel now consumed all their attention. They exchanged brief glances that did not require words. Each of them was thinking the same thing. What to do next? Sophie, with her natural tenacity, began to research. After school, she spent hours in her room, scrolling through internet pages, studying keywords that could be associated with the documents in the box. She tried to find buildings with columns similar to those in the photo and read about how the world of big money works. Zach, on the other hand, relied more on his powers of observation. He remembered where his father had hidden the keys and planned to figure out what they were for. A week passed. One Saturday morning, when Tom left home again, citing business, Zach decided to take action. He waited until his mother was busy with the garden, and then went into the kitchen. The drawer in which he had seen the keys was against the wall next to the refrigerator. He carefully pulled it out and began to sort through the contents. Among a pile of office supplies, old batteries and scotch tape, lay a small metal key. Zach took it and examined it carefully. There was no writing on it, except for a small manufacturer's logo. This only increased his interest. He carefully put the key back, deciding not to touch it until there was an opportunity to learn more. Sophie, having learned of her brother's find, suggested that they look for doors or locks in the house that might fit. However, after a quick inspection, they realized that the key did not open anything in their house. While Zach studied the physical evidence, Sophie delved into the virtual world. Her search finally paid off. She found a building that looked almost identical to the one in the photo. It turned out to be an elite hotel in New York. The information she learned was astounding. The hotel belonged to a well-known chain, and its owners had bought the neighboring plots of land several years ago to expand their business. Sophie could not connect this with their family, but it worried her that the photos of her parents were taken there. Perhaps it was a coincidence, but too many things said otherwise. The next week brought a new batch of surprises. Zach discovered an old safe in the garage that he had not thought about before. It was in the corner, covered with boxes and a rolled-up tent that the family had not used for a long time. Looking at the safe, he realized that the key he had seen might well fit. This discovery pleased him, but he decided that he needed to act carefully. Without his sister's consent, he did not want to do anything hasty. In the evening, when his parents were already asleep, Zach told Sophie about the find. She listened to him with interest, but warned him that they had to be extremely careful. The risk of being caught was high, and if their parents found out that they were digging into their secrets, it could lead to a serious conflict. Despite her caution, the desire to find out the truth outweighed any fears. The following Saturday, when Tom went out on his own again and Lisa went to the store, the children decided to take a chance. They went to the garage and began to free the safe from everything that surrounded it. The work took longer than they expected. The boxes were heavier than they seemed, and the tent was rolled up so tightly that it had to be unrolled to make room. When the safe was finally accessible, Zach took out the key. His hands were shaking slightly with excitement. He inserted the key into the keyhole, and the mechanism gave in with a slight click. The lid of the safe opened, and inside the children found several folders, neatly stacked in a pile. Among them were certificates, contracts, bank documents, and another photograph. In the new photo, Tom and Lisa looked even more elegant than in the previous one. Lisa was holding a glass of champagne in her hands, and Tom was standing next to her, hugging her shoulders. They were both smiling, and the background again betrayed luxury. It was a huge terrace overlooking the city at night, illuminated by millions of lights. Sophie took the photo and looked at it for a long time. It was another piece of the puzzle, which only made it more difficult. The documents from the safe completely destroyed the children's idea of the usual life of their family. Among them were property certificates, which indicated that Tom and Lisa owned not only several buildings in different cities, but also shares in large companies. There were also bank statements with gigantic sums. This discovery stunned the teenagers. Sophie tried to contain her emotions, but her face betrayed internal shock. Zach, on the contrary, tried to remain calm, but confusion was visible in his eyes. When the children finished examining the contents of the safe, they carefully put everything back and closed it. They knew that their family would never look the same again. The big question remained on the surface. Why were their parents hiding their condition? And how did it relate to their lives now? They knew the answers to these questions would not be easy, but they decided that the time had come to find out the truth soon. Meanwhile, their parents continued to live as if nothing had happened. Lisa and Tom smiled at family dinners, discussed plans for the future, but the children now looked at them with completely different eyes. The day after Zach and Sophie examined the contents of the safe, the Brooks house looked surprisingly calm. The parents, as usual, went about their business. Lisa cooked breakfast, Tom watched the morning news, and the children sat silently at the table, pondering their new discovery. Hundreds of questions were spinning in their heads. They could no longer look at their parents with the same eyes, but they did not know how to ask the most important question. Why are you hiding who you really are? The whole day passed in anticipation. The teenagers decided to take their time, hoping that the right moment for a conversation would come by itself. However, the evening did not seem to promise anything unusual. Lisa was preparing dinner, Tom was sitting in the kitchen, looking through some papers and discussing plans for the weekend with his wife. Zach and Sophie looked calm on the outside, but the tension they were experiencing was palpable in the air. When dinner was almost ready, Tom unexpectedly suggested spending a family evening in the living room. Lisa supported his proposal with a slight smile, and soon the whole family gathered around a small coffee table. This time, the parents looked especially collected, as if they were also preparing for some important conversation. Tom spoke first. His voice was even, but there was a slight hesitation in it. He talked about how important it is for a family to be honest with each other, about trust, and how sometimes in life you have to make difficult decisions for your loved ones. Lisa picked up on his thoughts, adding that she and Tom had always tried to give their children the best, but also to raise them to respect work and life. The parents' words snowballed until they got to the point. Tom took a deep breath, looked at Lisa, and then turned his gaze to the children. And then he said what Zach and Sophie had been waiting for, but had never expected to hear. Tom explained that he and Lisa had indeed led a completely different lifestyle in the past. Even before they had children, they had built a business that had been incredibly successful. This allowed them to earn a fortune that most people could only dream of. However, as their income grew, they began to notice how money changed the people around them and even themselves. Many of their friends began to treat them differently, valuing their opportunities more than Tom and Lisa themselves. Over time, they realized that a luxurious life, although comfortable, does not make people happy. They dreamed of a simple, sincere family, where children would value not only material goods, but also real-life values. When Lisa became pregnant with Zach, they decided to change their lives radically. They sold part of the business, invested money in reliable investments, and moved to Lakeview, a quiet town where no one knew their past. Here they were able to become the family they dreamed of. They gave up luxury and chose simplicity to raise their children in a normal environment, far from the world of money and ambition. Zach and Sophie listened silently while their parents told their story. At first, it seemed incredible. Their parents are millionaires who consciously chose the life of an ordinary family. But as Tom and Lisa shared their memories, the children began to understand that their decision was based on genuine love and care. The parents explained that they had never considered money as the main measure of success. For them, it was more important to teach their children independence, responsibility, and the ability to achieve everything through their own work. Tom admitted that sometimes he wanted to tell the children the truth, but he was afraid that it would change their attitude towards life. Sophie, although shocked, began to think that perhaps her parents were right. Their modest life taught her to appreciate simple pleasures: warm evenings with a book, family walks in the park, cozy evenings at the table. Zach, on the other hand, tried to understand how this could affect his plans. He dreamed of an athletic scholarship to go to college, but now he realized that he always had a backup plan that he did not even know about. After the conversation, there was silence. Lisa and Tom gave the children time to process what they heard, not expecting an immediate reaction. Zach stood up first, went to the window and looked out at the dark garden, lit only by the soft light of the street lamp. He thought about how his perception of his parents had changed in one evening. Sophie, sitting on the sofa, stared at the photographs on the wall. Snapshots of their ordinary family, their hikes and holidays together. She looked at them differently now. Lisa stood up and hugged her daughter, gently touching her shoulder. Tom walked up to Zach, placing his hand on his shoulder. There were no words in these movements, but there was a warm, sincere connection that said that everything they did was for these moments. The night passed in thought. In the morning, the Brooks family greeted the new day with an amazing feeling of relief. The secret that Tom and Lisa had hidden for so long no longer hung over them like a burden. Now their life, although outwardly the same, acquired an even greater sense of integrity. Sophie and Zach understood that their parents did this not for the sake of deception, but for themselves. This story did not change their lives dramatically, but it gave them the main thing: the realization that true value is not in money, but in the people who surround you, in their sincerity and care.